1,000 or so. The equipment they use, well, it may be cumbersome on dry land, but it enables them to move around safely in an alien and potentially lethal environment. It's a world where you have to rely on your friends. Divers always go in pairs, and your partner or buddy is the only person who can help you. Our first report starts under the icy waters of Scapa Flow in the Orkney Islands, north of Scotland, where for many divers, the crystal clarity of the water makes up for its freezing temperatures. Since earliest times, seafarers have used the safe natural anchorage of Scapa Flow. Norse warriors sheltered here. More recently, the Royal Navy used the area as a base in both World Wars. On the 21st of November 1918, a week after Armistice Day, 74 ships of the German Grand Fleet steamed into the flow, escorted by the Royal Navy. They were to be held here through the long winter, while politicians decided their fate in Versailles. But on June the 21st, 1919, fearing another outbreak of war, the German commander ordered the scuttling of the fleet. 70 years later, the rusting hulks of 7 of these great warships still lie in the flow. From all over the world, divers come to explore these historic sunken vessels. It was September when a group from the University of York Diving Club came for a week to investigate the wrecks. It was the afternoon of the 3rd day. They'd already done a deep dive to 150 feet that morning. 2 of the most experienced divers in the group, Chris Aspinall and Adrian Angel, had been working all week as a buddy pair.
It was a rather nice day, relatively calm. We'd done a rather deep dive in the morning on one of the large battleships, and then the afternoon dive was planned on the Karlsruhe, which is a small destroyer class German battleship, which lies on its side, and this is a nice picturesque wreck.
She's in 24 metres of water, and the no-stop time for that is 32 minutes. And I must emphasise, you need to ascend at 32 minutes.
If they stayed underwater for more than 32 minutes exactly, they'd have to come up in carefully calculated stages to prevent decompression sickness, the bends.
First divers ready?
It's a process that takes time and valuable air.
I'd dived the wreck several times before and knew it reasonably well, so I could point out to Chris the relevant features on the wreck, specifically the guns or where the props were, because a wreck can be an exceptionally confusing place. To the uninitiated, it just looks like a pile of scrap. That day it was high tide, so the wreck was actually in about 28 metres of water. We were towards the end of the dive when we found a blast-proof door of a turret located towards the bow on the Karlsruhe. It was in exceptionally good condition. On closer inspection, it did look initially as if it was brass, but it wasn't. The hinges were badly corroded, so we inspected the door, had a good look round it, and then I manoeuvred off towards one of the forward guns. I just happened to turn round, and there was Chris violently swimming backwards because the door was come loose and was heading towards the seabed. There was a large plume of silt and sand, and quickly finned back down to see Chris amongst what was now exceptionally low visibility. So at that particular time I was unable to ascertain any problem. He was pointing vigorously. By this time the silt was settling, and I was able to see the door had actually fallen right across his leg. His eyes had virtually popped out of the sockets and were embedded on the front, on the inside of his mask. The pain and terror held within that look just told it all. He was in severe pain and we had to do something straight away. By this time had elapsed and we were way over the no-stop limit and considerably into decompression time. So my first reaction was, no problem, Chris, I'll just quickly lift it off you. Really, because of its size, I didn't think it was a problem. Heaved and heaved, and to my dismay, it just didn't move. Not a millimetre. It was just static. It was as if it was bolted to the deck. That's when I really started to worry.
80 feet above them, all the other divers were rising safely to the surface.
That was absolutely fabulous down there.
Hey, did you get on that gun? Yeah.
There were times when I thought, what do I do? Should I just leave him and go to the surface and raise the alarm? But for sure, he would have just drowned. I was quite prepared to take my twin set off, leave him with my air supply, and then do what is a free ascent. And that means straight from the bottom to the surface with no air, because I was into decompression time. If I'd have done a free ascent, statistically the chance of me reaching the surface conscious are very slim. It wasn't a good option because I wouldn't have been able to probably raise the alarm. Other options are, if the door won't come off his leg and I'm unable to lift the weight, then do you watch him quietly or frantically drown and die, or do you chop his leg off?
How much are we late now?
3 minutes over.
3 minutes.
Adrian had tried repeatedly to move the door, but couldn't. By now, they were both so short of air, he had just one last chance.
So I thought, right, this is it. My complete being was focused on the removal of the door. Squatted down and heaved and heaved. In doing so, I just moved it a fraction, which spurs you on. The adrenaline's going, you're really working hard, and it just gave it enough to give it a bit more, and I held it and locked off. Then Chris just crawled across the seabed, free of the door. The sense of relief as I looked at him was overwhelming. He was free, although by now I could actually see his leg, which was severely broken. Unfortunately, our problems didn't end there. At that time, we were seriously into decompression time and would have been unable to return to the surface safely.
Adrian had to calculate the speed of the ascent to stop tiny bubbles of nitrogen forming in the bloodstream and giving them the bends. Too fast, they risked unconsciousness or even death. Too slow, and they'd run out of air. Their friends were powerless to help. They'd already done 2 deep dives that day and were too inexperienced to risk returning to the seabed again. They could only wait.
We'll keep a good look out for them.
My arms were becoming tired, my legs were becoming tired. I was consuming more air as a result of fatigue. By constantly looking at the diminishing air supply and the time, we eventually got to the conclusion of the stops. We were so far into the red, we were running on vapours. And as a result, we would have probably had it minutes or seconds left.
Hello! Where? Down here! Adrian, where the hell have you been? You're 23 minutes late.
Chris has broken his leg.
His
Real
what?
bad. Well, way over the top decompression-wise.
He's broke his leg? Right.
Yeah.
Spence, you can. Jimmy.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, you can. Is that bad? Right, don't worry, Chris. We'll have you out in a minute, mate.
The leg was shattered actually in approximately 6 places, just below the knee. And looking at the x-rays, it was as if somebody had taken a toffee hammer to a piece of toffee and just hit it, and it had just completely shattered into small pieces.
2 years later, the club went back to Scapa Flow. The door, which had so nearly killed Chris, was brought to the surface.
And I guess months after the accident, you come to realise that you were very, very close to being in a fatal situation. But you've also got to look at it that it was unlucky that the hinges were in such a state that we didn't know the situation with the door. We didn't know it was going to come off. It's a chance in a million. I still enjoy diving. It's changed my attitude in the sense I don't go under items anymore. I stay well on top of things. It's obviously made me think about how lucky I was, but thankfully we came out of it, and I'm just glad that Adrian was diving with me and managed to save my life.
For his bravery, Adrian received the British Sub-Aqua Club's highest award.
I've subsequently seen the door, and I can't move it at all.
The back's gone.
The strength to lift it it was one of the things, it eventually, it just came. The adrenaline's going, it's the exertion, the mental concentration is focused on that one particular task, and that's all you have.